Ladies and gentlemen, my one regret today is that I cannot be with you in person to mark such an important anniversary and the launch of a much-needed educational project, especially when I read through the list of participants. You seem to have brought together so many leading thinkers whose work I greatly admire, and some of whom I know, among them Wes Jackson, Vandana Shiva and Bill McKibben. There are, I know, many other leaders of environmental, educational and faith groups, and those with civic and philanthropic interests, not to mention the mayor of Louisville, Greg Fisher, who, I understand, has a personal commitment to the development of local food systems. Now, having convened such a remarkable gathering, I have no doubt you will be able to explore ways of breaking down the barriers that, in my experience, create too many conflicting silos of working practice. More sustainable food communities can only be built on the firm foundations of healthy soil, clean air and water, healthy plants, animals, and of course, people. Like many thousands of people around the world, I have long been a great admirer of Wendell Berry's work, even before he wrote his landmark book. He is undoubtedly a truly brilliant wordsmith, but it is the fact he uses that consummate skill to defend the welfare of the land and the communities who farm the land that makes his work so important in the long term. You are, I know, marking the 35th anniversary of the publication of The Resettling of America, which rests on Wendell's astute observation of what we exclude when we allow the word agribusiness to replace the word agriculture. A simple observation capturing completely the social and environmental problems we unleash when we see the earth as a machine rather than a living system. I was delighted, therefore, to hear about the Berry Centre's intention to create an academic degree course that would reinstate culture into the business of producing food. And I was particularly encouraged that this is based on two principles central to my own concern: that farming should be as local as possible to where the produce is consumed, and that the health of the soil and nature's intricate biodiversity are seen as linchpins to all we ask the earth to provide. As we all know, this is not the way things happen in the main. And I'm afraid that when consumers are prevented from making informed choices about where their food comes from or how it is produced, we expose ourselves to all sorts of problems. A globalized retail system that puts enormous pressure on small farmers to produce food as cheaply as possible also increases the chances of all sorts of dangerous practices becoming the norm as everyone struggles to cut costs. Meat, for instance, ends up produced in awful circumstances or coming from unreliable sources, or as we have seen in Europe lately, not even coming from the animal we are told it is. The situation is then compounded by a subsidy system that effectively penalizes those farming systems which produce environmentally friendly and healthy kinds of food. Surely, then, we have to find a better way. This is why I was so encouraged to hear that immediately before this Berry Centre event, Christy Brown, with the help of Patrick Holden, Sam Dryden from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Jane Mallon-Cady from the McKnight Foundation, Peter Seligman from Conservation International, and others, hosted a smaller gathering of researchers, scientists, policymakers, and foundations who focused specifically on what she refers to as true cost accounting. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of this issue, which I raised in my Future of Food speech at Georgetown University in 2011. It is also closely related, I must say, to a project I launched here in London 9 years ago called Accounting for Sustainability. This kind of thinking, where such factors as the damaging external costs of intensive food production are properly accounted for, is beginning to make an impact around the world, and not before time. The task, then, that we face is to persuade businesses and government departments to ensure their decisions and reporting systems take account of the impact they have on the health of nature's capital. So, if you attended Christie's event this week, I can only urge you to embrace the idea. The point being, if the true costs of production are included in business accounts, it becomes much more obvious which approach is the less destructive and less expensive in the long run, the one that damages the earth or the one that considers its health as paramount. Unfortunately, at the moment, those who pollute definitely do not pay for the damage they cause, and this unfettered situation all too easily allows for irresponsible sourcing and farming practices. Interestingly, those businesses who have signed up to my initiative are now finding, much to their surprise, that rather than costing more, this form of accounting makes sound business sense, and consumers respond positively. So I do hope that the true cost accounting discussions will pave the way to a coordinated international research and development program that perhaps may benefit from the resources of the foundations that attended my Highgrove gathering, aided by a shortly-to-be-appointed full-time coordinator, which was one of the outcomes of the Highgrove meeting. As I say, nothing could be more important. When I compiled the book, which I gather many of you may be taking home later, I remember asking Wendell whether he thought it a good idea I called it harmony. He replied, saying, "Harmony is an indispensable principle which can only be established through health. Health," he said, "is the practical measure of harmony." I remember his letter also cautioned against thinking such a principle a simple truth. "Industrialization simplifies," he said. "Good farming does not involve a simple life. As he put it, to farm well requires both complex knowledge and a complex enactment of responsibility." I'm afraid that until such time as the mode of thought that drives our increasingly globalized system of food production adopts the sort of initiative I have just mentioned and is made to enact its responsibility, and until such time as we have a system of subsidies that supports a sustainable agroecological form of farming, we are not going to see the transformation in our food production systems that is so urgently needed. However, I take heart from the Lord Buddha's observation that with our thoughts we make the world. And with that in mind, I can only urge you, ladies and gentlemen, on in your important endeavours. By meeting as you are doing, you help to forge the world we can make. So I do wish you every possible success with your event today, and even more so in your efforts to put the wisdom you harbour into the practical action our world so desperately needs.